I look at those failures and I know they've also made me. You know, they've forced me to adapt, and they've built resilience, and they've forced me to get stronger inside as well as out. Because as you guys know, there's no shortcut to any of our dreams that somehow magically avoids, failure. Failure's it's like that doorway. You gotta go through it if you're gonna succeed. It's always nice to have the best side of ourselves put forward in an introduction, and I stand sometimes listening to it, but there's always a little part of me that also feels that the guy standing in front of you is often different. I'm often full of nerves, really, and I experience many moments of self-doubt as well, and for me, when I look back on so many of these moments of like cliches maybe with my life and things that have happened, and when I actually look at what has made the difference at critical moments, I see three really clear, maybe unlikely things. Three clear words that I think define actually so much of my journey. But it's been understanding how to master those three things that's also changed so much. And it's those three things that I want to share with you briefly this afternoon. So the first of the three words, and arguably the most important word really, and it's this: failure. And this is where I want to start. Stood in the rain at the foot of a windswept mountain in the Brecon Beacons. And I was soaked, I was shivering, sick with nerves about what lay ahead over the next 11 months. And this was day one of British Special Forces selection to try and join 21 SAS. And we were a band of 90 recruits, or volunteers as we were called by the directing staff. And if I'm honest, at this point, I'd never felt just so out of place. I was surrounded by these huge, muscle-bound, soldiers who really looked the part. A bit like my good friend who's with me today, Mark. Nice to have you with us, Mark. Mark's an ex-Aussie SAS guy. Mark is the exception to the rule, and Mark does look the part. But I just remember this day one, I had that dreadful feeling that I'd volunteered for something that was way beyond my capabilities. And the first time that I tried for the SAS, after 6 months of beat up, I was failed, or returned to unit, as they call it. And the raw truth is that I wasn't fast enough, I wasn't smart enough, I wasn't good enough. And that truth really hurt. People often don't know that I failed selection, SAS selection first time round. People tend to gloss over the failures. But the truth is for me is that my failures in my life far, far outweigh the successes. Many times over, I just have to think of all of these failed expeditions I've done over the years, the failed projects, the near-death moments that definitely still come to me in the night sometimes. But I look at those failures and I know they've also made me. They've forced me to adapt, and they've built resilience, and they've forced me to get stronger inside as well as out. Because as you guys know, there's no shortcut to any of our dreams that somehow magically avoids, failure. Failure's it's like that doorway. You gotta go through it if you're gonna succeed. And for me as a young soldier, I was determined that I was gonna retry for the SAS, to go through that selection process once more. And such a big part of me dreaded it. Now I knew what was involved, I dreaded it. I dreaded the blisters and the unknown and that kind of fatigue, that deep fatigue. But I reapplied, I went through that whole thing once more. And this time, by the end, out of all of those recruits that stood at the beginning, all those months later, we were down to just 4 of us. But here's the thing. out of the 4 of us that were still standing at the end, 3 of us had failed at our first attempt, but then got it second time round. In other words, without the failure, there would have been no success. And the message for me is super clear. You gotta embrace failure. Change your mind about it. Embrace it. Don't run from them. Look at them. Know the role of failure. Treat it as essential markers. And like I said, the doorway that you might have to go through many times if you're going to reach where you really want to get to. So that's the first word. How to deal with the failures. Understanding the role of failures in our life. The next word I want to talk about, and this one arguably shapes all of us in some way, and it's this: fear. Because, as you know, life is scary sometimes, and all of us, you're going to face battles. And they might be battles of, confidence or nerves. Battles where sometimes you're going to have to face some giants. And those giants can be really scary. But it's a universal truth that whoever we are, life will test you. It's going to test you physically, it's going to test you mentally, it's going to test you emotionally. But how we react to that testing determines so much. Because here's what I've learned, is that life doesn't always just reward the brilliant people. It's just not like that. Life doesn't actually, even though you might not feel it right now, life actually doesn't care that much about the exam results. Or the letters after your name, or what you look like. Life's different to that. Life rewards the dogged, time after time, all through history. Life rewards the determined, those who somehow, despite those fears, can find a way to walk towards the scary stuff, towards the giants. And after 3 years in the military, I had a moment that changed my life forever. It was a routine parachuting jump in Africa. It was getting dark. I was falling past 4,000 feet. Check that altimeter, time to pull. I throw, deploy, look up. But instantly can see that something is very wrong. And I'm just struggling to control this thing, and I'm falling way too fast. Then I'm too low to use the reserve, and I just remember bracing for impact. And then my world goes silent. I remember the African, this kind of pretty ropey hospital, and I'm alive, but I can't move. And just then, doctors and pain, and I'm told that I've broken my back in 3 different places. And then just a blurred journey home, and back in the UK, many months in military rehabilitation. For me, I think the hard times there were often the night terrors, actually. For me, always about falling, always out of control. And then I'd wake. And it might make you wonder if I've ever jumped again. Of which, as you guys know, the answer is all the time. All the time. Part of my life. A choice to try and embrace the difficult stuff. And don't get me wrong, I dread it. I really do. I dread it in here, and I dread the nights before. And then that roar of the wind, and the door opens like, for those of you who jumped, you know what I mean. For me, it's terrible. It hits right in here. But I know the answer to my fears. You gotta face them. Don't run. Use it. Become friends with it. Because life and experience has repeatedly told me that if you can edge towards your fears, they often will melt away. So don't run from the difficult stuff. Always keep moving towards it. Own them, make those things, the very things that frighten you, make them serve you. Because fear is not a bad thing. It's actually, when you harness it, it's what gives you your edge. So, we've dealt with the failures, trying to find a way through our fears. But now we've got to learn how to turn both those things into power. And that's where the third word, the fire, comes into it. That fire to keep moving forward, against the odds. That fire to hang on. That fire to endure beyond what is normal. And it always raises the question, how? How do we do that? How do we find? How do we get that? Because sometimes in life that fire inside gets a little beaten up. It gets a little hidden. Sometimes that fire is barely an ember. And you might have had these moments. But here's the thing: it's always there. If you're alive and you're breathing, you're beating. It's always there. Faintest of ember. But the fire in your life, if you can learn to harness it and find it, it can change everything. And I remember when I was on Mount Everest, the mountain claimed 4 of the climbers' lives who were with us up there during that time. Two died of the cold, and 2 fell. And it's what high mountains do. They beat the hell out of you, and they ask that question: what are you made of when you're on your knees, when you're hurting? And I'll never forget the final hours on Everest. We were at 28,000 feet. We'd been climbing now for over 55 days up there. And it's minus 40 degrees. And we see the dark ice face of the final 2,000 feet looming above us. And I'm terrified. I know the next 24 hours from here on is going to change my life one way or the other. But I also know at this point, after so long at high altitude, is that I'm weak, really weak. And mentally as well, just exhausted. And I remember being in this chest deep powder snow, up to here, steep couloir. And this thing is just never ending. And I keep, every time I take a step, I keep sliding back. And I reach this point where I'm just no longer sure if I can actually do this. I feel it in here and I have this voice that keeps telling me this. And it can be loud, that voice sometimes. And slowly I'm bowing to it. But remember, sometimes an ember is all it takes, and I just say to myself, I make a decision. I'm gonna keep moving that way. Inch by inch at a time, I'm gonna keep going. Just never give up. NGU. And finally that summit came and I remember collapsing to my knees, I think out of exhaustion, I was a wreck, but I'd made it, and we watched the dawn come up over Tibet, and truly aware that we were stood somewhere special. It was the icy roof of the world, as they say. But the truth is, even though it was icy, the truth is it was the fire, really, that fire that had got me there. And I look back on so much of my life, and if I took one thing, this would be it, the fire. It's been my most valuable weapon by miles. Not talent. I don't have a lot of that. Not skills. I've learned a few, but I forget a lot as well. Not knowledge, because my brain's weird and it comes in, it goes out. But resilience. Resilience. And if all you take from our time together in your busy schedule when you should be revising is this: know the power of unrelenting, unwavering resilience. Because it's the very storms of life that everybody goes through. It's the very storms of life that actually make us strong, ironically. And as with all dark nights, sometimes you just gotta You know, you might be going through it right now, but with those dark nights, you just got to hold on doggedly. You got to trust that the dawn will always come. The light is always going to win. And when it comes to fire, as you guys know, in nature, all powerful. 3 words that if you can really understand them in your life, they'll empower you. How to deal with the failures that knock so many people back. How to deal with the fears that cripple people and they don't do anything. And how to harness the fire. But there's one final element to this talk that is important, because really reaching the summits of our own mountain, passing your exams, you know, passing selection, writing a book, whatever your summit is, should never be a whole story. And this final element is about trying to live with real gratitude and to try and be kind along the way. And you know, I've had the privilege to climb mountains with men who've lost their legs in war and then never stop smiling. You know, just stop for a moment and look at all we have. You know, that gratitude for the good stuff. And it comes easier for me now because I've had so many close shaves. I look back on so many times of, you know, I probably count, I reckon, about 20 times that I should have lost my life, especially in the early days of filming shows like Man vs. Wild and, you know, many of the early TV shows. I would say 20 is not a number I'm very proud of, but in those early days, we were just like gunning it and going, and it was like we didn't, you know, we just kind of went for it, endlessly bitten by snakes, falling down crevasses, pinned in white water, rock falls. That time in the Costa Rican jungle when I thought it was a good idea to rappel 100 foot down this waterfall with using just a vine, and the vine wasn't quite as strong as I'd hoped it to be. All these things, they taught me the simple lessons. Number 1, don't be an idiot. And number 2, always be grateful. You know, and I guess really what I'm trying to say through all of this is pretty simple. First is that I'm no hero, truly. You know, like I, not very articulately try to say at the beginning, I struggle often, I really do. But I know the weapons that serve me best. And they always come from in here, not just, you know, here. And I guess my hope in all of this is that you only need a couple of nuggets, whatever it is, but somewhere in all of this is something that will keep you going through those dark nights that everybody will go through at some point. But also they'll keep you smiling in the brighter days. But above all, I want you guys to know, stand tall. Stand tall even in the storms. Stand tall. You are made amazing. And the ember never goes out while you're still standing, it's there. And above all, never give up. NGU.